Yeah, so this is a talk about cultivating academic honesty, and it grew out of things we were doing at LMU, which I did as CTE director, because we were somewhat unhappy with the state of affairs at LMU in terms of student understanding of academic honesty, faculty work on it or lack thereof, and also then the outcomes. We had way too many cases of academic dishonesty with often somewhat questionable circumstances in terms of it wasn't entirely sure whether the students really knew what was going on, to what extent it was intentional. We actually had intentional. I'll say a few more things about that in our rules and got rid of them for good reasons. And so we started to think about creative ways of doing hopefully better. And what I want to do with you today is briefly introduce a bit some general points about academic honesty and dishonesty, and then I want to show you one tool that I have developed over the last couple of years with the help of some other faculty that has proven to be very effective in addressing the topic. So there will be some hand-on parts where you actually will basically take the role of students so you can experience how that tool works and can see whether you want to use this in some form, adapt it in some form to your own classes. But before I go there, so this is what we're going to talk about, is what is academic honesty, so what do students know and think about it, what are effective ways of addressing it, and so again, a couple of hands-on things I want to do there. I Googled you guys and tried to figure out what you actually have. I found this brochure which I liked quite a bit, and the one reason why I liked it probably the best, I've done this workshop now in a couple of places, and you actually start out with a positive definition. And that's absolutely rare in the field. Most people start saying, you're not allowed to do this. Hardly anyone says, so usually I start actually the talk by saying, what is academic honesty? Because in most places you have absolutely no definition. You have one, I think there's a whole lot more one could say, but I think it's great that you actually talked about what is it that we're trying to achieve. So respect the rights of authors by crediting or original sources for all information you use, think critically about quality, do your own research and writing. And so this is a somewhat narrow definition of what academic honesty is. And I want to say a few more things about what one could potentially add there. I've also seen that a lot of your departments have their own rules, which again I found a very nice thing to see because that doesn't exist in a lot of places. And so then you have in your student, I actually don't think I copied down what it's called, your student handbook or something like that. You have so the typical rules, maintain academic standards, including, and again I think that's nice that you emphasize that you have these standards at different levels, institutional, school, department, program, and individual course standards. Oops, I think it's supposed to show up at once. Maintain academic ethics and honesty. To this end, the following activities are specifically prohibited. And you probably know this all, but I want to briefly read through it anyway. Copying from another student's tests, using materials during a test not authorized by the person giving the test, collaborating with any other person doing a test without authorization, knowingly obtaining, using, buying, selling, transporting, or soliciting in whole or in part the contents of any without authorization of the appropriate university official, bribing, soliciting unauthorized information, substituting for another student, knowingly obtaining academic credit for work that is not one's own, and knowingly involved in arranging fraudulent academic credit. What is unusual, just as little feedback, is that you're not saying that this list is not exhaustive. Now, so almost all schools have a disclaimer there, because this list is indeed not exhaustive. Even from my own experience, I can already give you examples that are not in that list. Plagiarism, which is acknowledged unsighted use of any other person's or group's ideas of work, collusion, falsification, giving, selling test information, unauthorized resource or aid in the preparation, and then infringing on copyright. And then you have a third piece, obtain if you do not obtain the instructor's permission before recording lectures. And that's an interesting one because we don't have a rule for this, and it's becoming more and more a problem, in particular in terms of freedom of speech and other things, academic freedom and so on, that students are using recorded, I don't know, you'll probably have all heard about the scandals where students recorded instructors, posted it on YouTube, and then harassment began. So I think it's good that you actually have this in the policy. Then you have a list of sanctions. I didn't go any further to copy this. What I actually did is I put together 3 questions of a survey I often do with faculty, and I thought I'd give this to you to very briefly think about this yourself, and then I want to make some points about these questions. Obviously, I have no idea what your faculty overall would be thinking about this, but that may be an interesting way to start some of the discussion. So if you would just go through questions 1, 2, and 3, and also 3, because it's a bit more of a complex question, would be helpful if you had an opportunity to briefly think about that. That's for you to keep, so fill it in whatever way you want. Okay. Let's just see what you got, and I'm not actually going to ask you in detail to reveal this, also because if I do this, I often do it ahead of time and then it's actually completely anonymous, but I want to give you a bit of a sense of what people typically respond, and you can see where you fall, and if you have any questions or comments, please interrupt me at any time. So the first question was about when and how you discuss academic dishonesty, also honesty, and I'll say a tiny bit more about the positive version also towards the end. And since I don't really have a scientific survey based on this, so I just said how many people picked what here. And let's look at the first day of class. I usually have a fairly equal distribution of people who say any of those four categories. So at the beginning of the class, do you discuss it extensively? That means you go into detail that is tailored towards your class. That means it's specific for whatever the things are you're doing in class. You do it extensively, but you use a standardized, meaning a template, something you use all the time, or you do it briefly, again, adapted to the class or in general. The evidence is very clear that what really only works well is this one here, the very first one, extensively and tailored. So if you use a template, and a lot of schools or departments have templates, and you just use that and make a few comments and move on, it's almost as good as not doing anything. Yeah? So just to be very extreme, and again, most people, I usually get something between 21 and 27 or 8% on all of those, so it's very evenly distributed. The one we should be doing is this one, in terms of effectiveness. So what is important that you tailor it towards whatever assignments and work you're doing in the class. And that's usually slightly different between every time of class, whether you do more writing, problem sets, artistic work, or whatever it is. That you actually in some form raise the specific challenges these activities have, so that the students are prepared both for the challenges and then also for the temptations. So what are the things that can go wrong? What are typical instances of plagiarism that can occur? Under what circumstances do they occur? So for essays, we often know that last-minute procrastination, other things, so really pulling those things out. So spending time on it, and again, I will give you a tool that may be a way of addressing this a bit later on, but also doing it with sufficient attention to it. Yeah? On the syllabus, pretty much everybody does something. Most people do have a fairly extensive piece on their syllabus. Many schools mandate that. I don't know whether you have a mandate or not, but most people use the standardized template that comes. Poses the same problems. Yeah? So what is strongly recommended, use if you need to use a standardized language, but add again whatever is specific to your class, so that the students can be prepared, and you don't need to necessarily cover all of that at the beginning. We can get to some of these things later on. Yeah? So there are some people who do this, but again, the majority does standardized, which is still better having it extensively than just barely dropping. Some people have a sentence in there, plagiarism is not allowed or something like that. That's as good as not being there, but maybe from a legal point of view, a bit safer. And then the question about each in-class assignment or each out-of-class assignment. Each does not always have to be each, because if they're all the same type, then maybe you can skip some of this. But there are many people who do not do any of this. So they don't think about what is specific to this assignment, what do I need to make sure the students understand. Depending on what you have done before, it doesn't necessarily have to be extensive. You see hardly anyone does that. But in many cases, it's really helpful if it is. So if you do an assignment for the first time, or if it's a new type of assignment, or a slightly modified one where they're not immediately aware of that fact, it would again be helpful if it were both extensive and tailored. And these numbers are usually like 5% or something like that. I'm getting here, so they're very, very low. And many, many people are over here, and we usually have a third to one half who don't do any of this. Yeah? Okay, group activities. That's one of the cases where, depending on the field, you do very little or a lot of it, and the students often run into problems. We often want them to collaborate in some form, but we also always have a line. And where that line is very much depends on the field, and very much depends on the person. But for the students, it's very hard to figure out where your specific line is. So for instance, in my classes in economics, I allow a lot of collaboration, and if they do, I have group work problem sets, for instance, but I don't allow free writing on them. And if I see or have a suspicion that some students are not contributing their full part to it, I have now a rule in my syllabus, I reserve the right for an oral exam, and I've done these oral exams. And if I figure out that they haven't done everything, they fail the problem set, and then they also fail sometimes the class depending on the severity of it. Yeah? But so I make very clear, you can work with each other as much as you want, but you all have to equally contribute. And the moment I get a suspicion that that's not happening, I will be following up. Yeah? But what I do is much more collaboration than a lot of others allow. So a lot of others say you can talk to each other, but you have to hand in individual problem sets or something like that. And again, then you need to very clearly draw the line between what means talking together and what means writing up individually. And that's where a lot of students run into problems. So it's actually a fairly big problem that very few people do this both extensively and in a form that's geared towards the assignment. And I will be coming back to this comment repeatedly. Students go from one class in economics to a class in art history to a class in English, and the standards and the assignments and everything is completely different. So the burden is upon us to make clear where our lines are and what our expectations are. We cannot expect that, even if they're majors, and it's not their first class in the field, that they will know where that is. Yeah? Okay, and then dedicated class activities is one of the things I want to talk about today. Very few people do them. Some do something really, really brief. I want to suggest slowly, if you walk away with one thing today, think about doing it properly, just dedicated to that in class. Like with everything, writing, speaking, and so on, you're not getting quality for free. You need to dedicate time to it. And the time is worth dedicating to it because you're not having the hassles afterwards. You can sleep well. And the time spent up front is the time saved many, many times afterwards. Yeah? But so I strongly recommend in whatever context that works for you to really spend time explicitly on that because that takes care of a lot of the other issues. Okay? So that was the first one I asked you. The second one was just sort of to give you a bit of a sense what influences if and how you pursue academic dishonesty. In some schools you have to pursue it no matter what. I don't know how that works for you. We now have rules like this and people still don't do it, so this is a discussion we're having right now. So if you write something in your syllabus about severity of infractions, you're perfectly fine distinguishing what you do, as long as your rules allow that. Where you get into a lot of trouble often is when you talk about intentionality, because it's very, very hard to judge intentions, and it can actually be legally problematic, because you're making assumptions and you may be believing some students and not others. So many honor codes and student conduct codes and whatever they're called have done away with the intentionality, because it's one possible source of discrimination. Availability of evidence, a lot of people, so when I do this survey, a lot of people say that plays a big role, and also effort involved in pursuing infractions, because it's hard work often to put the stuff together and do it. So again, if you can save yourself that work, it can be really helpful. This is an interesting one because I get very different responses in different places. So I gave that talk yesterday somewhere, and most people had no problems with the administrative support. In other places I've seen people say, I don't get administrative support, I'm not going to pursue it. My chair, my dean, my whoever is not going to back me up reliably, and I'm not going to do it. So really very much depends on the case. Student contrition, does the student say, okay, I'm sorry I did it? Or does the student say, no, 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 and you have proof to do it? So some people actually are more lenient on students that fess up to it than on students who